Hi, welcome everybody. Just want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and thanks for everybody who brought up non-perishable food for the Mid-Iowa Community Action. Now, on behalf of the Public Relations Student Society of America, I would like to first thank the committees on lecture for helping coordinate the speech with our special guest tonight. And now I'd like to introduce him to you. He is the Director of Community and Public Relations for Tyson's Food, and he's here to speak to us about corporate responsibility in Tyson's Food with hunger relief, including a partnership with RAGBRAI to raise funds and hunger awareness in Iowa. He's an amazing addition to our PR week this year. So now if everyone could help me give a big welcome to Ed Nicholson. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's great to be here. I was in Iowa in the summertime. They told me it'd be cold here, and so I wore my long johns and everything. And I was here in July, and it was not cold in July. We were with RAGBRAI, but they picked this topic for me: a nation hungry for corporate social responsibility. And the second part we added a strategic approach to corporate philanthropic engagement, because that's how we approach it. And the topic raised some questions in my mind, and I actually I want you to be thinking about them for a little bit. The first one is, what is social responsibility? Is it giving back? Is it philanthropy? Are there other ways that we can practice social responsibility? It could be being engaged, a company being engaged in its community, benefiting all the stakeholders that we have. Activity that benefits all the stakeholders. I'm a big Twitter user, and I put this question out, all these questions that I'm getting ready to ask you here to my Twitter group, and one of the things I got back was it's the right thing to do. So we'll think about that in a second. Whether corporate social responsibility is indeed the right thing to do. And if a nation is hungry for responsibility, does it demand it of companies? There's an old school definition of giving back that a lot of communities in agribusiness, a lot of companies who are in agribusiness have had, which is stated that we give back by providing jobs. We give back by providing a tax base for our communities, and that's our responsibility. And they don't carry that too much further. Obviously, Tyson doesn't believe that. Our definition is broader than that, but there are successful companies around that don't give back in the sense that we've been discussing. So, it may not be something that the public demands. I just want you to be thinking about that. Should a company's social responsibility engagement be driven first and foremost, by that expectation that the public has that companies give back to society? Because, if I ask the question in here, I won't ask a lot of questions, but if I ask the question in here, do companies have the responsibility to give back? Most of us would say yes. Or indeed, before they give back, should there be a business case for this? Should it be because ultimately there's going to be a return on investment for those resources, and the resources can come in many forms. Cash would be one of them, but time and talent and in-kind resources. And are these two mutually exclusive? I mean, do you have to separate the two? If it's primarily to meet public expectations, in other words, if it's a form of profit sharing that we do, is that obligation suspended if the company is not making a profit? Do we have an obligation to give back if we're operating in the red? And I'll tell you, our company has operated very close. Last year it was in the red, and this year it's sort of right there on the margin. And if there's a social responsibility to give back, what if your choices are between not taking care of other stakeholders that you have? For example, what if you have to eliminate jobs to give back? For example, to meet that obligation, do you still have that responsibility to give back? So be thinking about those as we go through this, and it's something that I would encourage you to think about as you place expectations on companies. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I grew up in Arkansas, and you probably can't tell by the accent. I went to a college in Central Arkansas called Hendrix College, and I got a BA with a major in English, and I wanted to be a guitar player when I grew up. And I actually spent a lot of time in college learning how to play guitar instead of learning English like I should have. But I went on the road and played music for a couple of years, spent a lot of time traveling around Iowa. In fact, I worked for a woman who had a Capitol recording contract as I was a sideman. She was out of Nashville, and finally decided that being on the road was not something I wanted to do the rest of my life. And so I went back to Little Rock and worked in the advertising business. And then after 8 or 9 years in the ad business, I opened up my own business producing commercial audio. And I still want to be a guitar player when I grow up. So that's what I do on the weekend. So anyway, but I'm in public relations. That's our group in Tyson, and people sometimes ask me, what exactly is that? So anyway, I obviously you'll see throughout this slideshow that PowerPoint is not my long suit, but here's a New Yorker cartoon. This is a guy, if you can't read it, that says. Who's obviously just shot somebody, and he says, "Call my attorney and say that I killed Ted in self-defense. Call my publicist and say that I wish Ted the best of luck in all his future endeavors." A lot of people think that that's what public relations is spin. It's not, is it, Fern? It's something that goes way beyond that. It goes way beyond publicity. It goes way beyond getting media attention for what you're doing, although that can be part of it. Let me tell you a little bit about the group I work in. We're called the Tyson External Relations Group, and under that cover, we have governmental relations. We have an office in Washington, D.C., in addition to some folks in Arkansas who talk to state and federal regulators. We have a media relations office, and for Tyson Foods, we're a fairly big company with a lot of moving parts. And we have to do reactive media relations quite a bit with 100,000 people and 100 plants. There's always something that interests the media, so our media relations people are taking calls a great deal of the time. We also have under our umbrella the internal communications group, because we feel it's very important that the messages that we send to the world are also sent to that very, very important audience, which we have, with that 104,000 people that we have working with Tyson. And we have the group that I work with, which is community relations. And our primary strategic focus is to engage our people in their communities, and specifically those operations communities, because we don't have people hired to do that. We develop plans with them to get them involved in their communities. And our group works with them to ensure that those plans are strategic, and they're developing relationships. And also under our group is corporate philanthropy, and that's what we'll talk a little bit more about. Anyway, the key word there is relations, because that's a very important part of public relations. It's developing relationships with stakeholders, and there are many tools for doing that. There are many ways to communicate with them, but in the end, it's all about that relationship that you develop with the stakeholders. We'll talk a little bit about the stakeholders that we have. Like I say, one of the most important stakeholders is our people. We have 104,000 people, and that work in about 100 plants around the country. We have 9 plants in Iowa and 9,000 people here, so Iowa is a very, very important part of the Tyson business. We have 365 million shares of stock in Tyson and about 100,000 shareholders. And those are very important stakeholders that we have. They have expectations of us. The team, all of these stakeholders have expectations of the company. The communities that the plants are in, like I say, about 100 communities. We need to develop relationships with the people in those communities, have good communication with them. The suppliers, everybody It can include the people who drive trucks for us, the people who supply us with breading for our products, any hundreds and hundreds of suppliers, and that also includes livestock producers. We buy cattle and hogs on the open market, and we have about 6,500 contract growers who grow chickens for us. And, you hear a lot about factory farming. Most of the people who grow chickens for us have 2 chicken houses, 100 to 150 acres. They're family farms, and so they're very important stakeholders for us because they depend on us, and we depend on them. So obviously, our customers are important stakeholders, and when we say customers, we're talking about the grocery stores, the people, the stores that sell our products, and about 50% of our business is in food service, which means restaurants and institutions. If you look at Tyson, the percentage of the protein market, the chicken, beef, and pork market that we have, it's about 25% of the market. So if you go out to eat, there's about a 1 in 4 chance if you order chicken, beef, or pork that you're going to be eating a Tyson product. Those people who actually buy the products from us, and then the people who buy the products from them, which would be the consumers, our stakeholders. And finally, you all are our stakeholders because you in a way you touch our business, and we have an effect on you. So it's very, very important that we develop effective relationships with you, and that's why I'm here, because I think it's very important that as public relations practitioners, future practitioners, that you hear me, and also as future customers, consumers, that you hear me too. So, looking at our company, sort of the financial side of our company, in fiscal 08 ended at the 1st of October. Our fiscal year runs September through October, and we sold over $26 billion worth of food. The net income from that was $86 million. If you look at those two figures, there's a pretty big discrepancy in those two figures, which means that we're what's called a low margin business. If you go out and you buy a package of gum, it's probably going to be a high margin product. Where that company that makes it is going to make in the 40 or 50% margin. For us, if chicken normalized, this would be in a good year. Normalized margin would be 5 to 7%. For beef, it would be 1.5 to 3%, and for pork, it would be 3 to 5%. Now, what that means, and I've got to say, these are never normal at the same time. So what that means is that if let's just say we have a normalized margin on chicken of 4%. So to make $100 worth of profit, we got to sell $2,500 worth of chicken. All right. So you got to sell a lot of chicken. You got to sell. Obviously, we'd have to sell more beef and more pork. So in fiscal 08, our chicken margins were, and that's a minus, were minus 1.3%. So I want to take you back to that question of, is it imperative for us to give back when we have all those stakeholders and our company's not making any money? We think it is. And I'll tell you, I think it's because there's a business case for it. There's a great business case. We're a publicly traded company, with all those shareholders. We utilize shareholder resources to do our good works. And what we're doing is asking those shareholders to invest in those good works, And there are many, many worthy efforts to invest in. It's one of the things you find out because they all come to us and they all want us to help them. And, it's a difficult choice. When times are good and profits are plentiful, it's really not difficult for companies to give back. But, when the ink runs in the red, when we're not making a profit, as it is now with Tyson, the good-to-do efforts become a lot more endangered. And I can tell you our company has gone through some austerity programs where people have lost their jobs, where we've closed some plants. And on the other hand, if there are measurable benefits to doing this, and measurable benefits to the shareholders for doing this, then that activity can be sustainable through the good times and the bad. We can keep on doing it. And the key to that sustainable is to provide a return on investment. And that's really what we try to do. I want to talk a little bit about hunger as an issue, and because it provides some context, for which we do this. According to USDA statistics, there are over 35 million people who are at risk of hunger in the United States, and 13 million of those are children. That's a real problem there, because childhood hunger and malnutrition can really create challenges that fall back on themselves. If a child goes to school hungry, it's difficult for them to learn. Then their health care becomes in danger. It's difficult for them to learn. All of that falls back into a cycle of poverty, which ultimately creates more hunger. It's really a vicious cycle. Relating it to Iowa, in Iowa, this is a USDA survey, almost 11% of Iowans were at risk of hunger. And that was in 2005. It's the last survey that we have access to. Times have become more challenging since then. We've got food inflation, increased fuel prices, a lot of things that will probably prompt an increase in hunger in the next survey. This is the stereotypical image of hunger. The guy with the sign beside of the freeway. And you may be surprised that hunger doesn't necessarily fit that image. All the people who are hungry don't look necessarily like that. Some may look like this. Some may look like a single mother, who's having to make choices between making that car payment and buying food. Some may look like someone who's having to make choices between health care and buying food. Some may look like an elderly person on fixed income who's having to make choices, between paying the rent or buying other essential things and buying food. And what we're seeing right now, unfortunately, some look like this. And again, that's the challenging part. What we're seeing right now is a lot of people who were in the middle class who now are at risk of hunger because their choices have been narrowed and been made more difficult. I'll tell you a little bit about how Tyson got into hunger. Prior to 1999, the company was involved in a lot of different efforts at the local level and nationally too. At the local level, we're big participants in United Way, and still are. That's a very, very important community philanthropic activity that we do. We still believe in that. We did some things with the American Cancer Society, the American Heart Association, and any number of Little League, churches, all kinds of relief for individuals. We really did get asked to do everything, and it's those choices are very difficult. But most we're not connected to our business, and there's not really a business case for a lot of these things. They're just good to do things, and it became clear that we couldn't do it all those good things, and so we put together a core group of folks who evaluated what we were doing with a goal of creating a philanthropic focus that was more strategic, that made sense, where we could do good and do well too. So why did we choose hunger relief? Obviously, we're a food company. Feeding people is part and parcel to what we do. It's everything we do. We're hardwired into a national food distribution channels. We have trucking that goes all over the country. We have distribution warehouses all over the country. We're the only brand of protein that is sold throughout the United States. We have a lot of very, very strong regional competitors. Purdue on the East Coast in chicken, Smithfield and red meat, Foster Farms on the West Coast. But we're the only company brand that is throughout the country. So food, as an in-kind resource, obviously, is much more easy for us to have access to, and go back to those margins. How much product that we have to sell to get cash. So food is a lot easier for us to have access to than cash is. So we can really make a difference by providing food and still do it without stressing the resources that might affect other stakeholders. So another thing is that protein is desperately needed by hunger relief agencies. The food banks get a lot of non-perishables. They get a lot of sodas and beverages, things like that. But it's very difficult for them to get that center of the plate protein, and they're very grateful for it when they do. And so it makes establishing relationships with them a little bit easier for us. We saw an area where we can be recognized as a leader. We can't give enough money to be recognized as a leader in heart disease or cancer, but we can we can have an impact in hunger. So that was the rationale behind us picking hunger. And we started a partnership in 2000 with a group called Share Our Strength. They're a Washington, D.C. based organization that raised funds primarily through feeding Taste of the Nation events around the country. And they raise millions of dollars and provide them to hunger relief organizations. And have a great relationship with Share Our Strength that's been ongoing since the year 2000. They've taught us a lot about hunger. And it's, the more you get into it, the more humbling it is to see the work of the people who are involved in that. We started bundling our in-kind donation reporting so that we could keep better track of it. We always donated a lot of food, but we started bundling it up so we could report an aggregate figure. And then we also sponsored a program they had called Operation Frontline, which is a nutrition education, food budgeting program that they provided to at-risk communities. The key goals there were, to sort of maximize the awareness for the in-kind donations we were doing, to engage our team members. Obviously, with 100,000 people, if we can engage 10% of them, then that's going to have a potential impact, especially at the local level. And so, we do a lot of things at the local and at the grassroots level. We found that that's really where we can really get a lot more mileage. We can do a lot more good rather than trying to do a big national program. Just to do a lot of local donation events and engage community groups. We have a local fundraising effort called Powering the Spirit that we operate in conjunction with Share Our Strength. And we do a lot of disaster relief where we take teams, cooking teams on the ground and then provide food too. We first did this after 9/11. We took crews into New York City and into the Pentagon and fed folks after those events. And so another goal was to engage and nurture relationships, going back to relationships with our key stakeholders, and that would include community leaders, our customers and governmental officials. And, working in hunger relief for 8 years has really broadened our approach to become more strategic. We had a fairly tactical approach to hunger relief at first. Quite frankly, we were just trying to get publicity out of it. And we realized that in order to be perceived as a real leader and a real player, that we were going to have to be more strategic, and we were also going to have to approach it from something that went way beyond just publicity and got into engagement. And I want to talk a little bit about the four-step process. And those of you who are in PR, this is a very important part of what you will study. There's a four-step process that includes, research, planning and preparation, execution, and evaluation. And we'll go into a little bit of that process as it relates to hunger relief with us. We use some formal and informal research. There's a Hunger Almanac that actually Tyson sponsors that is published by Feeding America, which used to be America's Second Harvest, that gives hunger relief statistics. We use a lot of hunger relief studies. We work a lot with food bank directors and their staff. We have a partnership with Feeding America, and there are 200 member food banks around the country. So we learn a lot from them about hunger and then about their stakeholders. We use primary and secondary research from partnering agencies, surveys. We spend a lot of time online. Google News, some of the monitoring services, the other monitoring services, to look at both how what we're doing has an impact and how other people who are engaged in hunger relief are having an impact. As I said, we're the sponsor of the Hunger Almanac. This goes onto the desk of every congressional leader in the country. It goes to all the Senate offices and the House offices in the country, so they can understand about poverty in the United States, and it's broken out into details that affect their own state. So we feel it's a good way to get our brand associated with with that good information. When we do a donation event, we do a survey with food bank leaders to see what kind of impact it had, both internally and externally. And what we did was we went back in and reviewed our strategy in 2006. And we decided that we would expand our partnerships. That we were going to have to. We had an exclusive partnership with Share Our Strength, and we decided that we would expand it. In order to be perceived as a company that is really truly engaged, that we were going to have to be involved with a lot of the groups that were affecting hunger at both the local and national level. We committed 10 million pounds of in-kind donations over a 3-year period, and we do at least 2 truckload donation events a month. When we do a donation event, we put a lot of media relations and publicity into that effort, and there are a couple of reasons we do that. Number one is we've learned that we don't just talk about us being great guys and donating this food. That only goes so far. We spend a lot of time talking about the issue of hunger. This is a great platform. If we have media out to a donation event, it's a great platform for us to talk about the issue of hunger, and to talk about the work that those food banks are doing. So really, what we're doing is sort of basking in reflected light. Our sort of tactically, one of the way we work it is to try to spend more time talking about the other key players than talking about us. So, but we've been fairly successful in those donation events. We also have a cash sponsorship of the Hunger Almanac, and we do a student food drive, which is in 12 communities nationwide. It was actually piloted based on a program that was in the Quad Cities, where high school students raise 1 million pounds of food each year for the food bank in the Quad Cities in Moline. And it's a great program, and what we would like to do is sponsor that and take it out and make it a national program. So, and we also work with a group called Lift Up America, which is that they have relationships with professional and college athletic teams, and so we do donation events with pro teams. We've worked with the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs, the Denver Nuggets, and the San Jose Sharks hockey team, and we typically do about 20 donation events with those teams every year. So, again, the goal is to raise awareness of our hunger relief efforts with those stakeholders, to leverage those in-kind donations to reflect corporate social responsibility, and enhance our reputation in the hunger community as a corporate leader. Broaden awareness of and support of our hunger relief efforts with internal influencers as well. Our internal audience is very important to us, because the one thing we found, and if we've engaged our people, is that they become proud of the company. They like to work for a company that's socially involved, and so it's really important for us to engage them. And to make our hunger relief philanthropic, transactional, where there's something that's given back to the company and integrated into a lot of different areas of our business. So again, we do a lot of in-kind donation events. And we have a partnership with the League of United Latin American Citizens, wherein we're doing donations into areas that have high Hispanic populations. Also, we're going to do a study with them to study hunger in Latino communities. Again, with Lift Up America. So we do media relations and community relations. Invite community leaders out when we have an event. That's an opportunity for those food bank leaders to again tell their story and what they're doing. Involving our team members, we have an internal fundraising effort called Powering the Spirit, which benefits hunger relief agencies in their communities, and that was what the RAGBRAI event was part of. And what it is our team members, do activities. Again, sometimes it's grilling events where they cook food and sell food. Our plant in Waterloo, Iowa, has a tug of war in which they charge $500 a team. They raised $20,000 for the food bank programs in Waterloo last year. So, and they engaged. They invited teams from all around the community and engaged them. And so the people in Waterloo are aware of the fact that Tyson Foods is involved in hunger relief. And so it really does serve a lot of purposes for us. We've really been using social media quite a bit. I'm a big believer in social media. We've put up a website that has a lot of social media functionality. It's a blog approach. Like I say, I use Twitter. Started out using my personal account to talk about what we're doing, and realized that I talked a lot about what I was doing too. And so separated those. There's a Tyson Foods Twitter account. If you use Twitter, it's just Tyson Foods, and feel free to follow us. We have right now, after a couple of months, we have I think about 600 followers, and my goal is to have about 1,000 by Christmas. We use Flickr to post photos of our events. And we're working on some things. So, talk a little bit about RAGBRAI. Do you all know what RAGBRAI is? Obviously, most of you are probably from Iowa and are aware of it. But it's this huge bicycle ride across Iowa. 10,000-15,000 people riding across Iowa. For a week, and it's really this year was my second year of experiencing it. It's quite something. And we had team members from our Iowa plants who cooked and sold food in 11 communities along the way, and they gave the money, the proceeds, to hunger relief efforts in those communities, and we try to focus on childhood hunger relief efforts in those communities. And generally, in any community you go to, no matter how small, you can find somebody who's addressing hunger. And usually childhood hunger. We donated a truckload of food to each of the 5 Feeding America food banks along the way, and that was, I think, it amounted to about 500 pounds of food per mile ridden. That's how we positioned it. So, again, we used our blog fairly heavily during that time period. Every day we had a team of folks, and we had some good help blogging here. There's one of Tyler's to work. We gave them video cameras and posted the videos on YouTube. They're up right now. And Anna Weaver interviewed the director of the food bank where we made a donation down in Des Moines there, and Alyssa Atkinson spent a day with us just documenting the experience. So the Iowa State PRSSA really did help us a lot. We really appreciate it and look forward to exploring that further as we do this in future years, because I think it's a great opportunity for folks who know Iowa a whole lot better than we do to help document this. And again, we're using our website, which has blog functionality, comments enabled. We have a Flickr badge on the site. We have a blog roll on the side, and we're using it quite a bit. We have a program called Hunger All Stars, in which one of the things that we found out in the 8 years that we were doing this was that we would go to food banks and they would tell us stories of people who were just doing phenomenal work, and not, the unsung heroes, really. People who, I'll give you an example. There was the first Hunger All-Star that we had, and people can go on our site and nominate Hunger All-Stars, and we pick a Hunger All-Star of the month and make a truckload donation to their Feeding America Food Bank. First one we had was a 13-year-old guy who had raised $20,000 for his food bank in Oklahoma City. This woman here celebrated her 80th birthday by getting her award at the food bank in Springfield, Missouri, and she had been working, operating a feeding pantry for 25 years. We hear stories like that all the time, and we thought, well, let's use our communication resources to provide some attention and recognition for these people and let people nominate. So that's a part of this website, and you can go onto our site and see these stories. And one of the things we did, sort of a tactic that I've been experimenting with, is I've gotten through Twitter mainly, gotten engaged with some people who are very, very actively involved in social media, and a lot of them are in Austin. And one of them called me up one day and said, would you be interested in donating some food to the food bank in Austin? And I said, well, yeah, I've got an idea. Here's what I want to do. I want to post blog posting on our site about hunger in Austin, the statistics on hunger in Austin, and what the food bank is doing down there, the good work the food bank is doing. And for every comment that we get to the site indicating that this has been read, that we've actually created awareness for it, we'll donate 100 pounds of food to the food bank, up to a truckload, which is 35,000 pounds. So we've taken 350 comments, and I thought, well, we'll get 350 comments. It'll probably take us a week or so to get it. But I thought, with the social media network that we had, we got 350 comments in 4 hours. And it was done largely through the Twitter networks, through the social media club in Austin. Again, it just shows the power of online communities. And I'm a big believer in that. And one of the things we're trying to do with this site is to develop some online community around the issue of hunger. Because there are very, very passionate communities already built around the issue of hunger. Food bank personnel, people who work in food pantries. These people are really, really passionate, but they're not connected online. And if we can be the catalyst for that, there again, that's an opportunity for us to take the lead. So that's what we're trying to do. We did this same tactic in the Bay Area in San Francisco. There are 5 food banks out there, and worked with some people who were blogging out there. And that would have been 210,000 pounds of food with 2,100 comments, and we got 2,100 comments in 4 days. So it's very interesting to see the comments that we're getting too, because most of them, especially in the Bay Area, you can well imagine there are people who they're not meat eaters. Some of them aren't, and we had a lot of. I'm a vegetarian, but I still think what you're doing here is good. I don't agree with you always, but I think what you're doing here is good. And we allow negative comments too. So it's one of the things that you have to do within this medium, is you have to allow that conversation to occur. But overwhelmingly the comments were positive toward what we were doing. So again, we use YouTube. When I go out, I try to interview food bank directors, people engaged in hunger, post them on YouTube, and embed that video on our site. This is an interview with a food bank director in Austin. So again, I use Twitter. So that's the Tyson Foods Twitter account. That was a month ago, and again, we're up to about 600 now. Flickr is an online photo sharing site. Some of these are the photos of RAGBRAI that we had. We took photos along the way, and anybody can go online and see these photos. We can also embed them, on our site too. So we have about 80 events a year, where we're doing donation events, in-kind donation events. We try to have about 25 of those in Tyson plant communities, because it's very important for us to take this activity to where we have plants. And as far as the quantitative coverage, we measure impressions. Last year we got about 40 million impressions, and these are very, very brand-rich impressions. And if you once you start working in PR, there are a lot of ways to measure impressions. If your name is mentioned in an article, then that most PR agencies will count that as an impression. But you and I reading that paper might not see it. It might be in what's called the jump, and a lot of times it is, but it still counts as an impression, in the way most PR agencies measure. But these are very, very brand-rich impressions. Most of it is local broadcast television, and our truck is out there with that big Tyson oval in there, and our people. That's again the most important part, because establishing a relationship is not going to happen with that. It's going to happen with this. It's going to happen with our people getting out there, and it's the people who are our detractors try to make the relationship happen with that, and try to depersonalize the company. But really, the company is a collection of people. It's 100,000 people, and the folks I know, are good folks. With 100,000 people, you're going to have some people who make mistakes. You're going to have some people who, they're not. It's like a community. If you imagine a community of 100,000 people, not all of them are going to be good, but we try to foster a culture, of doing the right thing. So, our brand is front and center on 98% of the coverage we got is positive tone. 85% mention Tyson in the top third of the story, and 41% mention Tyson's ongoing commitment to hunger relief. So we did a little study in some markets where we really focused on a couple of markets and measured case sales when we were doing some hunger relief activity, and we found that when we had kind of heavy awareness for hunger relief activity, case sales volume increased 14.9%. Our product sales increased 14.9%. So we can say that definitely there's an impact. So what is corporate social responsibility for us? It's really investing resources that otherwise have a direct impact on the bottom line that we could sell. Or cash, that would go to our profits, and that would have, an indirect benefit to society in the form of taxes and payroll, into efforts, that have direct benefits to society and indirect benefit to our company. So it's most effective, when it's sustainable, when we can continue it in the absence of profits, like at times like we're going through right now, when we can continue to do these things in the face of pressure to stop them, quite frankly. And when partners, in addition to accepting our resources, are willing to help us meet strategic objectives, and that partnership becomes collaborative. So we ultimately value is created. There's a real good book I recommend. It's by a guy named James Austin. It's called The Collaboration Challenge, and it's really about corporate nonprofit partnerships and how they can be made collaborative to create value and to be sustainable. And I'd recommend it. He's with the Harvard School of Business, and it's a very, very good book. So anyway, I really appreciate your asking me here. Support your local food bank if you can afford it. I know some of you did tonight, and we really, really, really appreciate it. So I'm available for questions if anybody has any. I talked too much there. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Ed, for coming to talk to us. It was really good to hear about what Tyson's doing for Iowa and for hunger relief. So this is for you.
Well, thank you so much.
Can we give him another round of applause?
put that together then, right? PowerPoint? I know, that's what I'm talking about. I do that.